Today, I'm sharing the truth about illegal immigration that many Americans have never, ever heard, and shattering 3 myths that are prominent in the United States. This is not a conversation about politics. I left the U.S. many years ago, and I'm politically homeless. But what I've seen in living outside the United States shows that there are 3 very prominent myths that most Americans don't understand when it comes to immigration and illegal immigration into the United States. Let's break them down right now. The first myth is that Mexico is somehow complicit in illegal immigration into the United States. Now, I don't follow all the U.S. news. And certainly, I would argue that the news that you watch in any given country is designed to fit a certain narrative. But I will tell you, yes, there are people who are crossing from Mexico into the U.S. illegally. There's no denying that. But the idea that Mexico is somehow just turning a blind eye to this, let me tell you about my experience. We host an annual event called Nomad Capitalist Live. It's 4 days of intense information about dual citizenship, how to lower your taxes overseas, how to protect your assets. We bring together great speakers. It is one of the best events you'll attend, and it's coming up soon. We have had the last 2 Nomad Capitalist Lives, and previous to that, we had 2 other conferences in Mexico. They gave us a great deal. They have a great system in Mexico for people, foreigners, having their live events there. But I decided I don't want to have any more events in Mexico. They treat our company well. They treat my staff well. I went to Mexico 2 years ago. I used an ID card that I'm allowed to use. I'm no longer a U.S. citizen. And I said, hey, I can use this ID card to not get a visa. And they said, oh, well, we're not sure why a white guy would have that, so sit over here for an hour. All right, fair enough. They were very nice. In I went. No problems. Next time, I get a different kind of visa. And they didn't like that I didn't print it out. They didn't like that it was on my phone. So they immediately said, go sit over there in this back room for 2 hours. Eventually, a guy comes out, very nice. I'm not sure why you're here, but sorry, go ahead. The last time I go for our last live event, I actually got a sticker visa in my passport, the way some of my employees do. And I said, okay, there's no way this could be an issue. It turns out they put the comma in the wrong place. You, go sit over there. And I basically sat in this room for 3 hours while they figured out how to change the comma. Again, I'm sitting there with a Spanish-speaking employee from Colombia. The guy comes out. He's like, why are you here? I'm so sorry. Like, please, next time just do it this way or just tell them this or get it. And I'm like, listen, I love Mexico, but this is enough for me. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't go to Mexico. We've had a lot of people move to Mexico, and I'm all for it. But for me personally, there's an issue. Now, here's what I saw sitting back in the corner. Is I saw a lot of other folks that they were saying, oh, we think that they might go to the United States. They take it really seriously to the point where they're putting people, including last time, half of the business class that I was on my flight, Turkish Airlines, Istanbul to Mexico City, was put in this room. And I mean, we're talking about people who, one of them sat next to me, has a U.S. visa. What's the issue with him? But they're so really focused on this. And so I'm not going to comment whether Mexico should do that or not. I love Mexico. But I will tell you, it just became a little bit inconvenient because in my experience, I've seen people that they're really checking to make sure, hey, we don't want to go there. We also had a few people that we know who just couldn't get a visa because, oh, we assume people from that country would come to Mexico as a way to then go into the United States. So the idea that Mexico is just letting people flood right in, Mexico, honestly, is really putting in place protocol, especially at the airports, to make sure people aren't coming in and using it as a way to get in. Is somebody slipping through the cracks? I'm sure that they are, as with any process, but I don't see it personally as a global citizen in a large scale. Now, here's the second thing I think people get wrong. People don't understand that not everyone can just come to the United States. And so I was having dinner with my parents and my wife and a friend of ours. She's a single woman from Egypt. This is a couple years ago. And they asked her, hey, have you been to the United States? And she said no. And I'm like, guys, she's a single woman. She has a highly paid but a freelance job. And she's from Egypt. And at the time, this was the discussion of the Muslim majority. We should have a Muslim ban. She's from a Muslim country, not a practicing Muslim, but she's from a Muslim country. How would she come to the U.S.? Well, no, but just for a visit. Guys, you can either come to the U.S. or you cannot. There is no, it's just for a visit. In fact, at some embassies around the world, consular officers, what I've heard, have talked about how weddings are the #1 thing people lie about to try and come to the country. Why do people want to come to the U.S.? Yes, there are people who they just want to come on a tourist visa and they figure they'll overstay. Most people don't, but some do. And that's why there are about 42 countries where you don't need a tourist visa. So about 20% of the world can come without 20% of the countries, something like very small percentage of the population of the world could just come to the United States. Mostly European, Australia, those kind of countries can come without getting a visa. Everyone else has to get a visa somewhere. So when people that we talk to, hey, I want to renounce my citizenship in the US, how do I come back? Well, unless you're going to have a passport of one of those 42 top-tier countries, which is going to require some work or some expense or some effort, you're going to have to go and get a tourist visa. They might grant it to you, and they might not. I mean, every country has their own success rates. And so this idea that anyone can just come for a visit is a misunderstanding. We have, again, our live event, and we've had a couple of Westerners we've hired over the years that have said, why don't we do our events in the U.S.? Wouldn't it be great to do an event in Las Vegas? We had our very first ever live event in Las Vegas. Now, set potential tax considerations aside, we run a business outside of the U.S., so why would we want to put ourselves into that system? But the other issue is we have some European Union employees. We have a couple of U.S. employees who work overseas. But we also have people from Serbia and Georgia and Armenia and Colombia and other countries who help us all around the world. They need a U.S. visa. And quite frankly, some of them are rather young. Again, some of them are unmarried. Many of them do now work for our legal companies in those jurisdictions. That's a point in their favor. But there's no telling whether they would be able to get visas or not. And heck, I don't know that the U.S. wants me coming to the United States after they watch all my videos. I perhaps exaggerate, but I wouldn't certainly put full confidence in that. And so the idea that, like, why don't we have our events in the United States just shows the difference between people who are used to never having to apply for a visa and those who are used to having to apply for a visa. Now, take the Serbians, for example. They have really a top-tier passport, and they can go to countries that an American or even a European can't. But there's a few countries they can't go to: U.S., Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and in some cases, like in Serbia's case, UK and Ireland. Those are pretty much the big countries. There's a few others, the Central African Republic, for example, but those are the big ones they miss out on. They can go to Europe, they can go to South America, they can go pretty much everywhere in the world. And so if you're looking at getting a second passport, if you're going to keep your U.S. passport, where you can travel may not matter as much. If you're looking at losing that U.S. passport potentially in the future, you want to understand what are the implications of where you can travel to those few number of countries that make it difficult for most citizens of the world. Not just everybody can come to the United States under the guise of, I'm just here for a week. Because, again, listen to the politicians. They would say, well, hey, people are going to come and stay here and work illegally. That's the whole political rhetoric. And so if you let someone in for a week, who's to say they wouldn't just, go somewhere else? That's why even if you fly through the United States and you need a tourist visa, you have to get either a transit visa or a tourist visa, because there's no sterile transit in the U.S. You cannot just, as you might in Europe, for example, fly through and stay airside. You have to go through immigration, go through customs, collect your bags, recheck it, and get on the next flight, which is why, if you are living in Europe and you wanted to come to one of our past events in Mexico, I would tell you, just find a flight directly to Mexico. Don't go through that extra hassle, even if it's cheaper. So that's the second thing. The third issue is how long it takes people to come to the United States. Now, I'm not taking a stand on this, and your stand may very well be, who cares how long it takes for immigrants? But I will tell you, the U.S. legal immigration system is one of the most broken out there. In our space, Nomad Capitalist helps people obtain second citizenship, obtain golden visas, obtain residence in other countries. Some of them wanted to lower their taxes. Some of them want it as a backup plan. Some of them want it as an adventure or a social experiment. So we work with countries where you get approved for residence in as little as a month. Sometimes it might take 6 months. A year is a long time. We see our U.S. counterparts, people who offer, the U.S. EB-5 visa where you invest. And I'm constantly seeing attorneys saying, I just had to sue the U.S. government today. They've been jerking my client around for years, and I finally filed a certain suit, and then I got a result, and then like 6 months later they look at it, and then it's really inefficient. So even investors who are putting like $1 million into the United States are waiting a long, long time. Certain countries have to wait longer. Again, you might say that's good, you might say that's bad. I'm not saying it's an excuse to break the law. I am the goody two-shoes of the offshore business. But I asked some friends of mine recently, I said there's Indian citizens for a certain class of residence permit. Guess when they applied if they're just going in for their appointment now? And someone said 6 months ago. Someone else said maybe a year ago. I said, you're close. March of 1998, 25 years ago. And so when everyone says, everyone wants to come to the United States, I say to myself, if you're waiting for 25 years, we had a client whose wife had a sister who was applying for a similar residence permit to come to the U.S. and get a green card. And they said, we don't want to leave the U.S. quite yet because we want her to get this green card. And she's been waiting for like 16 years. You start to realize like how many people who have any talents at all, which are the kind of people that we work with, would want to go to a country where they've got to wait 25, 16, or even 5 years. On top of they have to invest. On top of when they get there, they get taxed on their whole worldwide income. And if they become a citizen, they don't even have the privilege of leaving. I mean, the green card program is one of the least flexible programs out there in terms of how long you need to be there, what the tax consequences are, what the tax consequences are when you leave, if you do leave in the future. And so the timelines are just really, really slow. Now, again, none of this stuff may bother you. And I'm not here to tell you that it should bother you. But Mexico is, I think, doing something to try and keep people out. You should understand that people cannot just come to the United States at whim. There is a pretty laborious process, even if it's to come for a day, even if it's to fly through on the way to go to Mexico, for example, and that people who are applying are oftentimes waiting a long, long time. Now, not everyone's waiting that long, but when you compare it to even, European Union countries, the wait is longer. And so when I say millionaires are no longer coming to the United States, there are millionaires leaving because the taxes, the social fabric is falling apart. There are American millionaires leaving by the thousands every year. And there are plenty of other millionaires, the ones that we talk to, that are saying, obviously, because, I watch Nomad Capitalist, I wouldn't want to move to the U.S., but why would I want to tolerate any country that makes me wait for years when I'm bringing them money, I'm bringing them skills, I'm going to put my business in their country? It's just a turnoff. And so when we talk about people are going elsewhere, that's why. They're getting a better deal. They're, as we suggest, go where you're treated best. 3 myths you should know. Now, if you're trying to figure out where you can be treated best, if you're saying, hey, this U.S., it's not all it's cracked up to be for me anymore, what we do is we help people figure out, how do I legally handle my U.S. taxes when I leave? How do I handle taxes wherever I want to move? Where do I move? How many places do I move? How do I get immigration permits there? How do I get dual citizenship? How do I get banking? We handle the whole kit and caboodle for folks who want to leave the U.S., leave Canada, leave Australia, because the deal just isn't as good as it used to be. Lots of other countries are rolling out the red carpet, not so much in some of these legacy brand countries.